The sandcastle theory refers to Labour assembling a coalition of voters with pretty much diametrically opposed interests based around something they dislike, which in this case is the incumbent Tory party, and how this coalition of voters really resembles a sandcastle. Looks beautiful, but gets washed away incredibly quickly. And we think that this coalition that Labour are assembling is perhaps an even bigger sandcastle than what Boris Johnson assembled in 2019, which quite quickly has shown to be, swing much the other way, which no one really expected.
So lots of people are going to the Greens or the Liberal Democrats or Reform. They're all turning against the Tory party. Many of them, of course, most of them are going to the Labour Party. But below that, there isn't really a solid enthusiasm in the country for the Labour Party. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 100%. There's not a huge amount of enthusiasm for the Labour Party or for Keir Starmer. But if you look at the coalition of voters they're assembling, they're taking huge amounts of, let's say, Liberal Democrat, sort of Cameroonian Tories in Surrey. They're also winning huge amounts of voters in Hartlepool who voted for Boris Johnson. They're also winning voters in Scotland and Wales. This coalition that Keir Starmer's assembling is a broader coalition, which in some respects is a great achievement than Tony Blair achieved in 1997. But it's also what we think is a highly unsustainable coalition. And that's really going to play out, post the honeymoon.
So very shallow, and they've been very, very clever in the way seats are being targeted, and the focus of the Labour operation is about as targeted as I can remember. But presumably the implication is they get lots and lots of seats, but with relatively little support deep down in the country, they will find themselves unpopular in government pretty quickly.
Yeah, 100%. And it's worse than that, because they're in government and they're going to obviously have to make decisions. They're going to have to make policies. And the people who voted for them, both the voters, but also the MPs who are representing them, are going to be pulling them in completely different directions. And they don't really have an anchor on which to go on. And what you'll find that their coalition, which, they can have a huge majority, could disappear incredibly quickly in the next election. I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at another enormous swing in the next election, where majorities that seemed impregnable and would last, 10, 15 years, suddenly swim back the other way.
So what we're really seeing is perhaps the first, or maybe the second after Brexit, incarnation of a much more unstable political culture.
100%. I think we assume that voters are the sort of, homogenous blocks that people, Conservatives have won the red wall. They're Conservative people now, but they're really just going to the voting booth and lending them a vote. They're not really thinking about it that much, and a lot of into huge amounts of political volatility, huge amounts of voter volatility, and you can actually see this playing across a lot of Western democracies right now.
And so, again, looking ahead, I think we can say fairly clearly at this stage in the campaign, only halfway through, but we can say the country has turned its back on the Conservatives. And in Keir Starmer's phrase, it's turned the page. The trouble is it doesn't know where it's turned the page to.
100%. And I think that's where not laying out a very, very clear vision, which might turn people off, but stabilises your coalition, could potentially prove a very, very big mistake for the Labour Party over the next sort of 5 years, because you really are going to, you mean all things to all people, but as soon as you're faced with the hard reality of governance, that sort of disappears. And it is probably more sensible to think about how do I build a really long-term sustainable coalition? Do I really need a majority of 180?
So, yeah, I was going to ask, what should they have done over the last year or two to avoid this position?
It's a sort of great question. I think if we are data scientists and political analysts. I'm not a special advisor, but what I can sort of opine on is that understanding your coalition and them understanding what you're about is really, really, really important. And if they're united by a dislike of something, and that something disappears, we all know what that something is, people quite quickly dislike you. And that's what we mean by this sort of sandcastle.
So in a sense, they should have been clearer, more direct, harder edged about their own politics. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. And if you don't like it, don't vote for us.
I think so. And I think that often the win the lead you have breeds conservatism. You know, they don't want to risk it. But actually, it's probably a chance to be a bit bolder and lay out a very clear vision. And that's like a long-term investment. It's an investment in your coalition knowing what you stand for, and you also shaping their preferences and being like, well, actually, I'm a new Labour voter. This is why I voted for them. This is why I'm with them for the next, 10 years. If it's all around, what you dislike, then you don't really control your own destiny.
Justin Ibbett, founder and CEO of Focal Data, thank you very, very much for joining us.